in the space of our learning. Should be a panacea. We're going to start today, pay days. That's 80B. Okay. The Mishnah says, the Paschal offering, you have to sprinkle the blood. So in this case, the blood was sprinkled. It's sprinkled on the altar. The blood was sprinkled, and then they found out that the blood was tamei, or the Pesach itself was tamei, the flesh was tamei. It says avachakne the shehu tamei is not referring to the person; it's referring to it. So everything was done correctly, except they found out later that it wasn't done correctly because it was actually tamei. It says hatzitz meratzer. That's exactly what the tzitz is for. The tzitz is the plate on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol that atones for these things, unknown tumah. In this instance, there was an unknown tumah. They didn't realize that the blood was tumah. Nitma haguf. Let's say not the blood or the carbon pesach, but the actual person himself, the fellow that's bringing the carbon pesach, he was tumah. That's eina tzitz meratzer. That doesn't help. So therefore, this person was actually tamei. He didn't know, but he was actually tamei. So what does he do? He brings the carbon on Pesach Sheni. That's what Pesach Sheni is for. Someone that was tamei brings a carbon the following month. This was a previous statement. It's interesting. The Mishnah quotes like an older version. It's because this has been said that a nazir is someone that has a certain time that he's supposed to not become contaminated. He's supposed to not drink wine. He lets his hair grow. If he does become contaminated, if he does become tamei during that time, he has to start over. If he thinks that he's done, so he's bringing the sacrifices that are brought at the completion of an nazirus. It turns out that he was really tamei. So he has to go back and start over the whole counting. What he brought at the end doesn't count. However, if what he brought at the end, thinking that it's Nazirus is over, which it actually was, but the blood or the sacrifice was tamei, not him. The blood or the sacrifice was tamei, then that's fine. So it says like this. The tzitz, which is the plate on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, that's there as an atonement for unknown impurities. It works for the blood or for the sacrifice, but not for the person. Okay, then we have one more point. It is possible that the person is actually tamei, and the tzitz still atones for that. And in other words, he doesn't need to bring another sacrifice for Pesach Sheni. What would that case be? That's if there was a corpse that was buried somewhere that no one knew about. Now, a typical case of this would be that someone was hiking or something and there was an avalanche. And this person happened to walk over that, but no one ever knew that there was a corpse under there. No one knew anything about this. So then he finds out later. So then he's everything is fine. That's a tumas hatahim. It's a special exemption. So Allah the Gemara is going to say on Peyala. Okay. The Gemara says like this. Listen to this. The blood was sprinkled, and then he finds out that the blood was tamei. Taima de nizrak b'achakach naida. Why does this work? Turns out that the blood was actually tamei. That's because when he sprinkled it, he didn't know about it. But let's say he did know about it, and he sprinkled the blood anyway. I have a coffee here. Thank you. It's a thought that counts. If he knows about it, doesn't work. Don't be insulted. Okay. You hear what's happening? that it's only if he doesn't know, then the tzitz helps. But if he does know, he doesn't bemaze it, is what I thought, Chaim, you were talking about. So it's like this. For a minute, 1 second, there's a contradiction. Alma tzitz meratza. What is the tzitz, the forehead, the plate on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, what does it appease for? What does it atone for? Aladam v'alabasar v'alachelav shenitma. The blood, the flesh, or the fat that did become tamei, bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid, whether it's unknown, b'shegig, I guess means mistake, or it's on purpose, bein b'nefs, bein b'ratzon, whether by accident or willingly, whether it's by an individual or community. Now, what the Gemara assumes right here is the phrase that we said, bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid, whether it's by mistake or on purpose, the Gemara assumes that we're referring to that the person sprinkled the blood, knowing that, unknowing, that's by mistake, or b'mezid is he knows that it's tummy, and he sprinkles it anyway, and it's still, the tzitz is still maratza. So we have a question on what we said before. You said before that only if you don't know about it, the tzitz works. Now we're saying bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid. Mezid means even if you do know about it, the tzitz helps. Okay, Amar Ravina. Ravina says, Tamasai, bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid hortza. How it became tamei is whether it became tamei by mistake or through absolute negligence. B'mezid, you did it on purpose. It's still the tzitzis meratza. However, zrikasai, the way the kohen sprinkles the blood, that's only b'shegig hortza, b'mezid lehortza. It's not talking about the sprinkling of the blood. The sprinkling of the blood is only by mistake. Is going to be an acceptable sacrifice. How did the blood become tamei? That, I don't know, someone made it tamei or came tamei by mistake, whatever. That's bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid. The sprinkling of the blood, that has to be b'shegig. That answers up the first statement in the diak of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, v'achar kach naida. Then he finds out. Okay, that was the answer of Ravina. Rav Shila Amar, Zrikasai. Rav Shila says different. He says the sprinkling of the blood, bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid hortza. Even if you know about it, you sprinkled the blood, you know that it's tamei. It still is the tzitz is still an appeasement. The person doesn't need to bring another carbon and doesn't have to bring a Pesach Shem. It worked, even if he did it b'mezid. Tamasai, however, the way it became tamei, that makes a difference. B'shegig hortza, b'mezid lehortza. If he made it tamei b'mezid, then it doesn't work. Even if the sprinkling was b'shegig. Yeah, so the Gemara now asks, 1 second. In our Mishnah, it says, v'achar kach naida, and then he knew about it. According to Reb Shila, even if he sprinkled it already knowing that it was tummy, it still works. What is, so 1 second, the Brisa that says b'shegig, bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid, hachikam, this is what it means. Nitman b'shegig, v'zarku, bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid hortza. That's how he's going to learn it. Because he says it doesn't matter, b'shegig or b'mezid. However, what about our Mishnah? The Mishnah says you sprinkled it and then you found out. That contradicts the Brisa. It's only if you sprinkled it and then you found out, not if you found out and then you sprinkled it, it's not going to work. The Gemara answers that the truth is that even if you knew that the blood was tamei and you sprinkled the blood, the sacrifice is still acceptable. So why didn't you say that? Why did you say to sprinkle the blood and then you found out? Because to keep the Mishnah parallel to the beginning and the end, that it says, Nitmahagov, if the person was tamei, then eina tzitz meratza, then the tzitz doesn't help. Even if the person didn't know that he was tamei, he only finds out later that he's tamei. So because in the strict case of the Seifa, when the person is tamei, even if he didn't know he was tamei, the sacrifice is still not valid. So we mentioned that same case in the Reisha, that he sprinkles the blood, not knowing that it's tamei, and then he finds out later the sacrifice is valid. But you want to know something more? Even if he sprinkled the blood knowing that it's tamei, the sacrifice is still valid. It's just that didn't fit the corresponding case to the seifa, because then there would be no chiddush. But he brought the carbon knowing that he's tamei. No, even bringing the carbon not knowing that he's tamei, it was still not valid. That's what the comparison to the Reisha was. Okay, so Chaim, the answer to your question before is if you sprinkle the blood, the tzitz is maratza. The answer is it's a machlekes. Yeah, like all good questions in the Torah.
Also my question.
Okay.
So this would imply that the Kohen Gadol had to be there all afternoon, Erev Pesach.
So,
right?
We had two opinions regarding if the tzitz is maratza, if it's only when it's on him or even when it's not on him. That was machlekes Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda, I think, regarding the Kohen Gadol and the Kodesh HaKodashim, where he doesn't wear the tzitz. Does it work then? We know that it does work. So one opinion held that the tzitz, he doesn't actually have to be there wearing it. Yeah, according to that opinion.
Okay.
Yeah. So you would say, Reb Naftali, you would say that the guy brings the carbon. You would have to check the cameras to see if the Kohen Gadol was there, to see if he has to bring a Pesach Sheni. That's what would come out. Yeah. Okay. Next piece. Nitma Tumas HaTahayim. We get into this concept here of Tumas HaTahayim. Tumas HaTahayim is this unknown grave. No one knows about it, and then someone became tamei because of it, and he only finds out later. Boy Rami Bar Chama. We said that Tumas HaTahayim, although by a korban Pesach and by Nazir, if the person is tamei, the person bringing the korban Pesach, or the Nazir is tamei, the sacrifice isn't eligible. It isn't good. It's not valid. He has to bring a Pesach Sheni, or by the Nazir, he has to go back and redo his whole counting. He has to start over. However, the exception was Tumas HaTahayim, that if he was tamei because of Tumas HaTahayim, and that's what he finds out later, then the sacrifice was good. Tumas HaTahayim is this lost grave that no one knew about. So Rami Bar Chama comes along with the question. It says, Kayin Amaratza b'korbanei seyim. The Kayin that's actually bringing the sacrifice. Putrulei Tumas HaTahayim Ilai. What about him? We were talking always about the owner. If the owner was tamei, what about the Kayin? Do we say that where were we taught that there's a leniency of Tumas HaTahayim, an unknown grave? That's only by the owners. The Kayin like Gemiri, but we didn't learn this regarding the Kayin. Or maybe it's more general. We learned it by sacrifices. Leishna b'Kayin, Leishna b'Bailam, and it doesn't matter if it's the Kayin or the owner. We don't know. Amar Rava. Rava says, Rava is a friend of Rami Bar Chama. And Rava actually married the widow of Rami Bar Chama, the daughter of Chisda. Rava says, Tashima, the Tani Reb Chia taught. Chia is the one that arranged the brises. It's a student of Rebbe. La yamna Tumas HaTahayim el lemeis bilvad. Tumas HaTahayim is only for a corpse. Doesn't tell us anything so far. Our question was, does it apply to the Kayin? Okay. Meis lamutimai. We have to discuss what Reb Chia means. When it says it's only for a corpse, a lost corpse, an unknown, this doubt that we don't know if it's really tamei, what was there. Lab lamuti Tumas HaTahayim d'sheretz. It must be coming to say that if there was a suffix, if he touched the sheretz, a sheretz wouldn't apply if it's actually in the bedrock. That you would have to actually touch it. But when it says when we borrow the term Tumas HaTahayim we mean a doubtful tumah applicable to anything. By a corpse, it's deep in the ground, and by anything else, it's just a suffix. We call it tumas hatahim, which means we don't know about it. Maybe yes, maybe no. So we're saying that this leniency only applies to tumas hatahim of a corpse, but not to a sheretz. We didn't say what not to. All we said is it only applies to a corpse. And you said the only. What are you excluding? You said it's excluding sheretz. What's the case? If the issue is with the owners, ubeman. 1 second. What are we talking about over here? Ibn Nazir. If we're talking about that, a Nazir became tameh with the sheretz. A Nazir is supposed to be 30 days, not drinking wine, not going into a cemetery, not cutting his hair, and then he touches his sheretz. Mimahani bey. Kiyamas meisalav hamrachmana. A sheretz doesn't affect the Nazir. It doesn't affect his 30 days. Tumas sheretz, this creeping dead creature, a lizard or something that he touched. He doesn't have to start over his Nazir. So sheretz is nothing by the Nazir. Yeah, he can't eat the sacrifice, whatever. He has to go to the mikveh, but it doesn't make him start over his counting. That's only for a corpse, for tumas mace. So it can't be that tumas hatayim is only talking about a mace, not a sheretz, and then we're dealing with the Nazir, because the Nazir it wouldn't affect anyway. Ela ba'isa pesa. Okay. So let's say what Reb Chia was teaching was that a sheretz doesn't affect someone that's bringing a carbon pesa. This could be explained according to the opinion that says that you don't shecht for someone that came in contact with the sheretz. Why? Because right now he's not eligible. Tonight he will be because he went to the mikveh, but right now he's not. He'll be able to eat it, but the shechita wasn't done at a good time. But according to the other opinion that says that you can shecht for him because tonight he's going to be pure anyway, if you can shecht for him when he touched the sheretz, so you tell me that you can't shecht for him if he doesn't know if he touched the sheretz. The whole thing doesn't work. The whole sheretz isn't the problem. So you say, oh, tumas hatayim, that leniency is only for a mace, not for a sheretz. What do you mean? Even if he touched the sheretz outright, he's still nothing. Still you can shecht for him. Elalav b'kayin. Must be we're not dealing with the owners. We're dealing with the kain. See, this was a roundabout way of getting a proof. We're trying to say, we quote Reb Chia that says the whole heter of tumas hatayim is only by a mace, not by a sheretz. Where is the sheretz applicable? By the kayin. Now I have an answer to Rami Bar Chama's question. Shema mina hutzalei tumas hatayim. We see that the kayin does have the leniency of tumas hatayim, but it's only by the mace, not by the sheretz. That's Rava's teretz to Rami Bar Chama's question. Amar Rab Yosef. Rab Yosef says lie. Rab Yosef is a teacher. Yeah, he says no. He disagrees. Lailam b'bailam. Really, we're dealing with not the kayin. We're dealing only with the owners. Uba Pesach. Ulamute tumas hatayim de ziva. We're talking about a doubtful tumah of ziva. Ziva is either a man or a woman that has to wait 7 clean days because they had some sort of emission 3 times. By a man, it's twice, and it's 7 clean days. By a woman, it's 3 times. 3 days. 3 days. Man is 3 times, woman is 3 days. But by the man, it's twice without a carbon, 3 times with a carbon. So the Gemara says, what are we talking about over here? What's happening is we're not referring to a zava that's buried in the ground and that we have an issue of someone traveling. That's not the case. The case is that we have a questionable circumstance of ziva, and that is that she actually counted 7 days. And what would happen is she goes to the mikveh sometime in the middle of the 7th day. She waits for nightfall. Now, if in between the mikveh and nightfall, there's more blood, it goes back and it retroactively destroys all of the previous days. So here we're in a case where she went to the mikveh on the 7th day. Really, she should be clean. she's clean already. The only thing is that there's a time there that keeps her in limbo. What's going to happen next? So we're talking about Lumuti Tumas Time Deziva, that there is no leniency in this. This Tumas time is only by Tamei Mace, there's a leniency. If the person that brought the owner, that's bringing the carbon, is Tamei because of Tumas time, he didn't know about it, so then it's acceptable. But Tumas time Deziva, it's not acceptable. Tumas time means that it's on the seventh day in between the mikveh and night. But Tumas time Deziva like Maratza, 1 second. It doesn't work, it does work. We're just negating Rabbi Yosef's answer that we're actually dealing with the owners and not the Kayan. Rabbi Yosef is trying to get rid of Rabba's answer. Rabba said that we're dealing with the Kayan. And Vayamru El B'meis Bilvad is negating the Sheretz. Sheretz, who does that apply? Oh, it applies to the Kayan. It says, no, we're talking about the owner. And we're talking about what a Sheretz doesn't have anything to do here. So we say it's talking about a Zava. So, but now we ask, 1 second, but by a Zava, it does work. But Tanya, we have a brayso. Rabbi Yosef Aimer Shemersiam Keneged Yom Sheshachta V'Zarka Aleh B'Sheni Shala. Let's say there's a woman. There's 2 steps to the ziva. There's a zava ktana and a zava gedayla. When we're dealing with the zava ktana, she sees one day, she has to wait the next day and see if she's clean. She goes to the mikveh sometime during this following day, and she waits till nightfall. If she sees again the second day, then the 2 combine. So, however, Rabbi Yossi says, if a woman is waiting the second day happens to be Yudalad Nisan. They shech the Karban Pesach. Then, what do you know? It gets messed up. She sees blood afterwards. Officially, it's Metamal Mafreya, right? Officially, it goes back, and the whole thing was Tamei. She was Tamei through the whole time. Eina Eicheles. She, of course, can't eat from the Karban Pesach. She has to wait 1 more day. Uptura Milas Pesach Sheni, but she doesn't have to make a Pesach Sheni. It's very interesting. It means Maratza. That's what Maratza means. Does the tzitz work? The tzitz would come into play here and say that the sacrifice, although she can't eat it, but it still was effective. My taima, lav mishum de Maratza tzitz. You see, it works. That was a case of Tumas Tahaim, well, comparable to Tumas Tahaim, where there was a doubt if there was really Tumah there. Turned out that there was. And you see that it worked. Amri, they say, lie, you got it wrong. You have no proof from here that this is a case of Tumas Tahaim. This is actually a different logic. It goes like this. Rabbi Yossi holds that when a Shemeres Yom Keneged Yom sees the next time, it doesn't go back retroactively, it just goes further. Each time is a new seeing. The Gemara is going to ask, so how does Rabbi Yossi have a 3-day consecutive seeing in order for them to add up to a Zava Gedola if each time you keep starting again? The concept of the Zava Gedola was that you don't start again. It goes back retroactively 3 days in here we're saying that Rabbi Yossi says you start again. The Gemara is going to ask that later. How do they combine? But right here, we're just saying that it has nothing to do with Tumas time. There's no Tumas time here because it doesn't go back. Tumas time would be if it goes back. It doesn't go back. It only goes further. But Tanya, really, is that so? Rabbi Yossi says it goes further. There's a problem with this. Rabbi Yossi Aimer Zav Balsterius. We're going over to the male counterpart of the Zava is a Zav. He sees twice. The reason why we're not saying 3 times is because the carbon that comes into play by the 3rd time is going to mess up the calculations here. The carbon would be brought on the 8th day. 7 clean days, goes to the mikveh. The following day, the 8th day, would be when he brings his carbon. If he counts 7 days, goes to the mikveh, he's waiting for nightfall, and then he sees again, and in between that time, they shechted the Karban Pesach for him. So that would be the similar case to what we're talking about by the Shemeres Yom, by the Zav. Goes like this. So it wouldn't work on the 8th day because on the 8th day by the Karban, it doesn't go back retroactive. It's a brand new seeing, it's a brand new sighting of the Zav. So it only could work a Zav Balsterius where there is no Karban, and we're talking about would it go back retroactively and make him tummy. So a Zav Balsterius Sheshachta V'Zarkala B'Shvi Shalai. They shechted and they sprinkled the blood on his seventh day, the last day when he's supposed to be pure at nightfall. Then he sees again. They contaminate retroactively. That's our problem. But they don't have to make a Pesach Sheni. Now here we're seeing both concepts. Here we're seeing that it goes back retroactively. They don't have to make a Pesach Sheni. Why wouldn't they make a Pesach Sheni if it's Tamei L'Mafreya? I'll tell you the pshat, because of Tumas Tahaim. Tumas Tahaim, the Tzitzis Meratza. It's a good pshat for Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef said we're dealing with the owners. Tumas Tahaim is only by the owners, not by the Kohen. Rava says it applies to the Kohen because when Reb Chia said La Yamar ala b'meis bilvad, it only applies to a mace. It was coming to negate a sheretz, but a sheretz only applies to a Kohen. So you say no, it's coming to negate a zava, that it doesn't apply to a zava. Now here we're saying it does apply to a zava. Here we have a problem. It's not going to help Rabbi Yosef, but it's definitely going to contradict. It doesn't play back all the way into Rabbi Yosef, but it's definitely going to contradict what we just said, that Rabbi Yosef says that it goes only ahead. Here we're saying that it goes back. It's metame mishkav u'moishav. Anything that she sat on or he sat on previously becomes tameh. Here, the answer that we gave before doesn't work. Amri, the Gemara answers this problem. It says, Maila Mafreya, what does it mean that it's metame mishkav u'moishav, anything that she sat on or laid on, retroactive, midrabanan, that's only rabbinic. Actually, biblically, it doesn't go backwards. This is Rabbi Yosef's opinion that says it only goes forward. Backwards was only rabbinic. We'll ask later again. We'll ask, so how does it combine? Rabbi Shia also holds this, that it only goes back rabbinically. In other words, you're waiting the 3 days, you're waiting the 7 days, and then the tumah goes back. It's metamel mafrei. It's not biblically that it goes back. The Tanya was taught in a brayso. Rabbi Shia says, Abel Zav Shira. There's a problem over here with saying that this is a brayso. I have a note on the side of my Gemara that says maybe Rabbi Shia said this. But we don't find Rabbi Shia in a brisa. So the Tanya is a strange word to put here. The Tanya is always in the way a brisa is introduced. Brisa means that it comes from Tanaim. Rabbi Shia arranged the brisas. Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shia, they arranged the Teseftas, which is a type of brisa. But you don't find them talking in it. And for sure you don't find Rabbi Yechanan talking, which we're about to see. The Tanya Rabbi Shia says, okay. Abel Zav Shira B'Shvi Shaloi Seiser Shalafana. Aval, but the Zav that sees on the 7th day goes back retroactive and erases everything that he was counting. Rabbi Yechanan says no, he only breaks that day. That day has to be counted again. So in other words, he counted 7 days. The 7th day wasn't clean, so he has to count one more day. Rabbi Shia tells him, Manavsha, if you hold that it goes back retroactive, so then if it goes back retroactive, so then you have to start everything over. If you say it only goes forward, he should only be, you see, he went to the mikvah already. You should be, if you want to say it's just from now on. So what happens if a Zav sees the first time? And he goes to the mikveh that day, and he's tahar that evening. So why are you saying he has to count again? He's tahar that evening. Why are you saying that he has to count another day? It's just it's like a Balkari. He goes to the mikveh and he's tahar that evening. Ella ema la yister v'la yaimai. What it means is that it doesn't knock out anything. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Yochanan says it's just a regular brand new Riyah. It doesn't go back at all. Nothing has to be recounted. He's just like he became a Balkari. Amalei Rabbi Yishia tells to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi kai kavasach. Rabbi Yossi holds like you. This that Rabbi Yossi says that it's only Matam Lamafrei, that's only rabbinic. In other words, Rabbi Yishia also said that Rabbi Yossi holds that it's only Tamei Mikan Lahaba. What we're doing over here by saying that it's Matam Mikan Lahaba is we're saying that it's not because of Tumas HaTahaim. We said Tumas HaTahaim that sits isn't Meratza. Because it's only Meratza it's only appeases for Tamei Meis, not for Tumas HaTahaim. We have these cases where it seems to work, even though there was Tumah, there's still the carbon works and all of that. We say no. There's nothing to do with Tzitz Meratza. It has to do with that the Tumah doesn't go backwards, it only goes forward. Nothing to do with Tumas HaTahaim. Rabbi Yossi, Hashdam Mikan Alaba Metama. According to Rabbi Yossi, how are we going to explain what Rabbi Chia said, L'meis bilvad l'mutei mai, when it says that Tumas HaTahaim is only for mace, not for anything else? What's it going to be talking about? It's not talking about Ziva, because over there is no Tumas HaTahaim. It's only Tamei Mikan Alaba. Nifshit minei, let's go back and explain and answer according to Rabbi Yossi, the B'kayin, we're talking about a Kayin, V'hod Shalai Tumas HaTahaim. We'll say we're talking about the Sheretz, back to Rabba's Teretz. Amri, they said, no, you don't have to say that. Yoilam b'bailam u'b'pesach. Really, we're dealing with the owners and we're dealing with the Korban Pesach. See, what happened over here was, Reb Chia says that Tumas HaTahaim is only for a mace. Special exemption. An avalanche fell on someone, and the owner of a sacrifice walked over that, shech the sacrifice, find out later on he was tummy. So we say, okay, the sacrifice was good. So it's only for a maid. It's not for something else. So what's that other thing? So we said it's not for a sheretz. We said, well, you can always shech for someone that touched the sheretz. What are you saying? It's not for a sheretz. Well, actually, there was a machlekes. Can you shech for someone that touched the sheretz? We said, well, according to the one that says you're allowed to, what is Reb Chia talking about? Now the Gemara says, well, Reb Chia is talking about the one that says, according to the one that says, you're not allowed to. Normally, shecht for a sheretz. Shecht for someone that came in contact with a sheretz. And over here we're saying that Tumas HaTahaim is an exemption. Really, ain't sheichtem v'zorkem al tamei sheretz. He's telling me right now, don't check the Korban Pesach for him. I know I'll be tired tonight, but don't check the Korban Pesach for him. However, if that sheretz was a suffix, it's considered like Tumas HaTahaim, then you can check for him. Ela Rabbi Yossi, the Gemara asked the obvious question, that according to Rabbi Yossi, if every time she sees again on the following day, it's going to be a brand new seeing, and you don't count the last one, and so how do you ever add things up if you keep starting again? The Gemara answers b'shefas. It's talking about that there was a constant flow. Okay, that doesn't sound very safe. Like hemorrhaging, right? Or it would have to be 3 days and it doesn't have to be 3 full days, but it have to be slightly more than 24 hours, because it would start the previous night and it would continue till the night after. Another option is, I'm not sure 100%, I'm missing a detail in this, that she sees the first Bein Hashmashos. Rashi's example is she sees Erev Shabbos, Bein Hashmashos. So that means it's a little bit of Friday, a little bit of Shabbos. So the second day was already caught in a time where there was no break in between. She's supposed to wait in between. There was no break in between. So the second day was already counted. And then she sees again, Motzei Shabbos, Bein Hashmashos. And somehow that's considered like 3 days. I'm not sure why the Shabbos itself doesn't, or maybe because she doesn't go to the mikveh. Maybe that's the pshat. She doesn't go to the mikveh on Shabbos.
Rabbi, didn't we want to have a case where if it was Bein Hashmoshes before and after Shabbos, since it was a suffix on Friday, it could have been Shabbos, and then
Right.
on Saturday night it could have been Shabbos. We actually
combine
included all three.
Right.
I think
That's what we're saying here. That's what we're saying here. Just the the detail that I'm missing is that I thought, according to Rabbi Yossi, every Riyah starts again, but that would only be after the mikveh. Maybe what it means is that she doesn't go to the mikveh on Shabbos. That's why Rashi was choosing that example of Friday night. Okay, by Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef has a question. What about a carbon tamid? We only said that there's an exemption of Tumas HaTahayim by a carbon Pesach and by a Nazir. What about by a carbon tamid? Now, there's one more detail here. We only said that the carbon Pesach and by a Nazir, the Tumas HaTahayim applied to the owner, not to the Kayan. We had a question if it applies to the Kayan. That was Rami Bar Chama's question. But let's say it does apply to the Kayan. Would it apply also to a carbon Taida? If you say, answering Rami Bar Chama's question, that it does apply to the Kayan as well, does it apply to the Kayan that's bringing the carbon tamid? Do we say that Tumas HaTahayim is a special limud, that we have an exemption, that he qualified, his carbon Pesach is acceptable, his Nazir carbon is acceptable? But tamid like miri, but we never learned that for a carbon tamid. Maybe you can learn from the carbon Pesach that it applies to the tamid as well. Now, the explanation for what we're doing over here, what's the scenario, is that if we hold Tumah, you see a carbon tamid, you can bring the Tumah, if everyone is Tumah. But if you hold Tumah is Hutra, B'tzibur, then granted. Then you just, doesn't matter. If everyone's tummy, just bring it, or if the majority is tummy, then just bring it, it doesn't matter. But if you hold Tumah as Techuya B'tzibur, do you have to go ahead and look for someone that wasn't really tummy? That look for someone that's not tummy? Or do you have to look for someone that's not tummy? I think we're assuming that we know already that the person has a Tumas HaTahayim under. This person walked over an area that later we found had a corpse. That must be the pshat. I'm a Rabba rather. Rabba says, the question here is, do I have to avoid this kayan because Tumah is Techuya? Or do I say that, no, Tumas HaTahayim, the tzitz is Meratza? So, I'm a Rabba Kalvachaymer. That's a Kalvachaymer. Uma b'makim shlei Tumah yedua Tumas HaTahayim by a carbon Pesach. If you know that he's Tameh, it's not good. But Tumas HaTahayim is good. Makim shlei Tumah yedua. The Gemara later on is going to discuss if Tumas HaTahayim is l'chatchila that you can go. Makim shlei Tumah yedua. In a case where there's no kayin around, because the there's no kayin that's tar, let's say. So in everyone's tummy, so the Tumah's hutra the chuya b'tziba, right? Any din shutlei Tumas HaTahayim. For sure, you should be allowed to use the kayin that only has a Tumas HaTahayim. In other words, this could have been totally permissible. The Gemara says, one second, Amri, mi dainin kalvachaymer me'alacha. The Gemara understands already now that Tumas HaTahayim, this exemption of Tumas HaTahayim, is halacha u'ma'ishim Sinai. and we try to make a kal v'chaimer from the halacha l'meisha misinai. If by a korban pesach you normally need to be tahar, and over here it's acceptable to be tamei. So in a case where the tzibur is tamei, where you don't need to be tar, for sure over here you don't need to have a kohen that's tar. You could use the tumas hatayim. So this is a kal v'chaimer that we're going to learn from the korban pesach, where tumas hatayim is acceptable. For sure, by when the community is tamei, by korban tamid, tumas hatayim should be acceptable. The problem is that you can't learn a kal v'chaimer from halacha l'meisha misinai. But Tanya, we have a brisa. Amalei Rabbi Eliezer Akiva etzem kesaira is halacha. Revius dam kal v'chaimer. Bein dan kal v'chaimer me halacha. What happened was, and this it's in Masechtas Nazir, we're talking about if a Nazir comes in contact with a revius of blood, he doesn't have to start again his Naziris. Rabbi Kiva says, 1 second. When it comes to a bone doesn't make a person tamei in a under a tent. If they're under a tent together, it doesn't become tamei. However, if he touches it, he has to count again his Naziris. So a revius dam, which does make a person tamei under a tent, for sure, if he touches it, he should have to start over his Naziris. And Rabbi Eliezer tells to Rabbi Akiva that the fact that if he touches a bone, he becomes tamei, and he has to start over, that's halacha l'meisha misinai. You can't learn a kal v'chaimer from halacha l'meisha misinai. So the same too over here. You can't learn a kal v'chaimer from the korban pesach, tumas hatayim, to korban tamid, because you're learning a kal v'chaimer from halacha l'meisha misinai. Elam Rava, rather Rava says, we can learn from the korban pesach, but not with the kal v'chaimer. We learn like this. Yalef mayadai mi pesach. We learn from the word and the pasuk. That you can do. It says in the pasuk mayadai by the korban pesach. It says by the tamid b'mayadai. You bring it in its time. So therefore, the halachas will apply to one to another. But tumas hatayim guf eichik siva. Where does it say in the title tumas hatayim? Rashi explains that this Gemara was actually learned prior to the previous Gemaras, because the previous Gemaras we already have an answer that it doesn't say it in the Torah. This Gemara was placed over here, but it was learned earlier, and then we're going to conclude that it's not in a pasuk. Amri Rabbi Lazar Amar Rabbi Lazar Amar Kra. Rabbi Lazar says that it says in the pasuk. If a person will die, it has to be clear. Okay, that's what it says by the Nazir. Ashkechan Nazir. If it's not clear, then it's not considered a real tumah. Isa Pesach Minala, and what about the korban Pesach? Where does it say that in the Torah that it needs to be a known tumah, not something that's tumas hatayim? Amar Rabbi Yechanan Amar Kra b'derech rechaika lachem. If a person is on a faraway journey and he's not there by the korban, by the Beis Hamikdash, by the korban Pesach, machveres lachem. It has to be clear to you. So we're learning from that it has to be clear also by tumah. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Amar Kederach, just like a road. Ma derech begali af tumanami begali. Just like the road is open, so too the tumah has to be open. The Gemara says, Meisvei, 1 second. You're bringing these psukim, it doesn't really fit. Ezu tumas hatayim. The brisa tells me, what is a tumas hatayim? Kosla yikabah echad b'seif ha'olam. That's only something that no one ever knew about. But hikabah echad b'seif ha'olam into tumas hatayim. Into tumas hatayim. This leniency of tumas hatayim is only if no one in the world knows about it. Someone in Australia, even in Australia, doesn't know about it. So that's considered a tumas hatayim. However, Rabbi Lazar, according to Rabbi Lazar, that brought the pasuk that says that you have to know about it. Adi Adahu, he has to know about it. That's not a tumas hatayim. Let's say someone else knows about it. The pasuk is not a good source. Rabbi Yechanan dar malachem b'machveres lachem adi yadi, but train. Rabbi Yechanan's lachem, he learns from lachem. Lachem is a plural you, and two people need to know about it. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish dar kederach adi yadi kuli alma. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, the whole world has to know about it. None of those are explaining tumas hatayim. Ela tumas hatayim hilchasik d'mirila across machtabalma. You're right. Tumas hatayim is halacha l'meisha misinai, and that pasuk was just an asma. Amar Mar Bar Ravashi. Mar Bar Ravashi says, Leishanu ala shenoida loi la'achar zrika. When do we say that the tzitz is going to work and appease and make the carbon acceptable, even though the person was tameh with tumas atahim? That's only if the person found out that it was tameh after the blood was sprinkled. Chi is darik dam, shaper is darik, because when the blood was sprinkled, it was done in a correct manner. He didn't know that he was tameh; he only found out later. But if he knows beforehand, it doesn't work. The Gemara has a question. If someone finds a corpse that's laying across the road, l'truma tameh. Regarding truma, he's tameh. L'nazav Pesach he's tar. For the other things, for carbon Pesach and the nazar, he's tar. V'chol tameh v'tar lahabahu. And all tuma is all for the future. Okay. What does that tell me? So we're seeing over here that even though he knows that he's tamei, he was still allowed to bring the carbon. He doesn't know that he's tamei. There's a possibility that he's tamei. Whenever we say tamei and tar, we're talking about for the future, not going back. So if we're talking about the future, that means that when it comes to truma, he's not allowed to eat truma. When it comes to carbon pesach, he's allowed to go ahead and bring his carbon pesach. Okay, so that's a problem. Rather, we have to rephrase what Mar Bar Ravashi said. Amar Mar Bar Ravashi, the truth is that even if he knows that he was tamei before this rika, it's still acceptable. Why? Because it was a tumas time. No one knew about this beforehand. When he went over that area, no one knew about it. That's a special exemption. Okay. Let me finish to the Mishnah. I'll just go quickly to the Mishnah. Gufa. We learned the corpse is across the road. Benegei truma, that's considered tamei. However, carbon pesach and nazar, he's considered tar. This is only if later on, when they find the corpse, it was impossible for him to go along the side anyway. He had to have gone over it. But if there would have been an area where the corpse wasn't laying, could be he walked over there, even for truma would be tar. That's only if the corpse was whole. But if the corpse was broken into bones, then he would be tar. Maybe he went in between, he zigzagged his way through. But if it would have been a grave, not just the corpse, it would have been a grave, then he would be tamei. Because the kever joins it all together, and even if the bones are separate, but the whole kever is tamei. When do we say all of these differences? That's only if he's walking. But if he's carrying a load, or if he's on a wagon, then he's going to be tamei. Why? Because walking in between the bones, zigzagging, is only going to be if that was him walking by foot. But if the wagon goes over it, that's considered a tent over it, and it's going to be tamei. When do we say that this is acceptable? That's only by tumasatayim. But you do it, then he's tamei, even for the carbon paste. What is considered tumasatayim? That's only if no one knew about it. Means it's tumasatayim. But if one person knows about it, even in Australia, it's not tumasatayim. Matzataman b'teven ba'afar b'treis reisa tumasatayim. You find that he's in straw, or dirt, or rocks, rubble. That's tumasatayim. But mayim ba'afela ben kike eslam means it's tumasatayim. But if he's in the water, then, or just somewhere in a cave somewhere, that's not tumasatayim. Because it could be someone had actually passed by and discovered him and just left him there. So it could be someone knows. That's what we said. It only applies to the corpse. Okay.